The total deposited into Bryan Kohberger's account over the last year, $10,812. The expenses totaled $10,635. Since his incarceration, Bryan Kohberger's mother has deposited more than $9,200 into his commissary account. The rest of the deposits came from his supporters.
Today, we are breaking open the Bryan Kohberger case, a man already behind bars for life, already convicted in his own words, is now telling a judge he lied. Under oath, he said guilty 4 times. 4 families sat in that courtroom, believing those words meant the end. Instead, they may only be the beginning of a fight no one saw coming. Because now, more than a year later, new court filings reveal something that's stopping investigators and legal experts in their tracks. While this man sat in a maximum security cell, money was moving. Thousands of dollars, flowing in, flowing out, and the numbers on paper are raising questions about exactly what that money was for. At the same time, in a handwritten filing sent straight to the court, he is now claiming the very confession that sealed his fate was never the truth at all. We're breaking down the confession that shocked a nation, the financial trail hidden inside his own prison records, and the petition that could reopen a case everyone thought was finished for good. Before we go further, a warning. This case involves real victims and real loss. We are not here to relive the worst of what happened to them. We are here to follow the paper trail, the filings, the financial records, the sworn testimony, and lay out exactly what it shows. If this is your first time here, subscribe. We break down cases like this every week. And before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. The case that appeared closed in every sense the law allows. A confession, delivered under oath. A sentence, finalized in full. No appeal available under the terms of the agreement he had signed. For the families. For investigators who had spent years building this case. For a country that had followed every development since November of 2022, this was supposed to be the end. It wasn't. Because somewhere behind the walls of that maximum security facility, away from courtrooms, away from cameras, something else was quietly beginning to take shape. Something that had nothing to do with guilt or innocence in the traditional sense, and everything to do with paper. Filings, ledgers, financial statements, the kind of records that rarely make headlines on their own, but that more than a year later would raise questions no one expected to be asking about a man who had already confessed under oath. It starts, as these things often do, with numbers. Financial records, later attached to Kohberger's own court filings, lay out in detail every dollar that moved through his prison commissary account over the course of a single year. And when you sit with those numbers long enough, they begin to tell a story of their own, one that has very little to do with guilt or innocence, and everything to do with what was happening to this man, financially, while the world assumed his case was closed. In total, $10,812 flowed into that account. Not from one source, in one moment, but steadily, deposit after deposit, month after month, from a wide and growing circle of contributors. This wasn't a single windfall. It was an ongoing, sustained stream of financial support, reaching a man serving 4 consecutive life sentences inside one of the state's most secure facilities. At the center of that stream is one name that appears more often than any other in the records: BRYAN Kohberger, his mother. Court documents confirm she is, by a wide margin, the largest single contributor to her son's account, having sent him more than $9,000 since his sentencing. Month after month, her name appears on the ledger. Whatever judgment the public has formed about her son, the records make one thing unmistakably clear. She has not stopped showing up for him, financially, in whatever way the system allows a mother to reach a son behind those walls. But she is not alone. According to reporting on the same court documents, at least 19 additional individuals have also sent money into Kohberger's account over that same period. Not family, not legal counsel, people with no listed connection to him at all, choosing, for reasons that remain entirely their own, to financially support a man convicted of taking 4 lives. It's a detail that sits uncomfortably with almost anyone who hears it. The idea that somewhere out there, strangers were compelled enough by this case to reach into their own pockets on his behalf. And then there's the other side of the ledger. What happened to that money once it arrived? Of the roughly $10,800 that came in, Kohberger has spent nearly all of it. Over $10,600 according to those same financial records. What remains in his account today is a little over $170. Almost everything that came in went right back out. To understand just how unusual that pattern is, it helps to step back and look at the national picture. A former federal prison warden, asked to review these same records, explained that the average inmate balance across the federal system typically sits under $500 at any given time, a figure that includes wages earned through prison labor, often no more than 30 or 40 cents an hour. Against that backdrop, Kohberger's spending doesn't just exceed the norm, it dramatically outpaces it. The records show individual commissary visits where he spent well over $100 in a single trip, a pace of spending most incarcerated individuals, regardless of the outside support they receive, never come close to matching. Which leaves one quiet, unresolved question sitting underneath all of it, a question that no headline and no court filing has fully answered. In a facility where every transaction is logged, every purchase tracked, and every dollar accounted for down to the cent, what exactly was all of that money being used for? Is it simply comfort in a place designed to offer almost none? Is it safety in an environment where relationships between inmates can carry weight far beyond what any outsider sees? Or is it something else entirely, something the records alone cannot answer? There is no confirmed answer yet, but the question itself is enough to make even seasoned observers of the prison system pause. Before we get to what happens next, if you're finding this breakdown valuable, take a second to hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep covering cases like this in the depth they deserve. And there's a lot more to this story still ahead. More than a year passes. For the families of the 4 students, that year carries a strange, uneasy kind of quiet. The kind of silence that follows an ending nobody actually feels finished. The case fades, gradually, from daily headlines. The courtroom that once filled with reporters and family members sits empty of this matter. Life, for those still standing, moves forward in the only way it ever can after something like this. Not by forgetting, but by learning to carry it. For investigators and prosecutors, the file is closed. Sentencing is complete. The right to appeal has been formally waived. On paper, there is nothing left to litigate. The case, as far as the legal system is concerned, has reached its conclusion. Then, in late July, more than a year after that courtroom fell silent, a single filing changes everything. It arrives at the Ada County District Court, the very same courthouse where Kohberger once stood, and confirmed, under oath, in front of everyone in that room, that no one had pressured him into his plea. This new filing looks nothing like the polished legal documents typically filed at this stage of a case. It isn't prepared by an attorney. It isn't typed. It's handwritten, page after page, submitted directly by Kohberger himself, now representing himself in this new legal effort. To understand why this filing exists at all, why a man who stood in open court and admitted his guilt is now trying to undo that admission, it helps to understand exactly what he gave up when he originally signed that plea agreement. He didn't only accept responsibility, he waived his right to ever appeal the outcome of his case. Under the terms of that agreement, this matter was meant to be permanently closed to any further challenge in court, for the rest of his life. But the law, even in cases like this, leaves one narrow door open, a door that exists separately from the traditional appeals process entirely. It's called a petition for post-conviction relief. Rather than arguing that a trial itself was flawed, there was no trial here to challenge, This kind of petition allows a convicted person to argue that their constitutional rights were violated somewhere in the process that led to their conviction in the first place. It is rare, it is difficult to win, and it is exactly the path Kohberger has now chosen to walk. Inside the handwritten pages of that filing, he makes a claim that stands in direct, almost startling contradiction to everything he confirmed under oath more than a year earlier. He writes that he was pressured into confessing to something he now claims was not true. He alleges that his own legal team, the same attorneys who stood at his side in that courtroom, the same attorneys he told Judge Hippler under oath that he was fully satisfied with, misled him during the process and made him promises that were never ultimately kept. At the center of his argument sits a single piece of forensic evidence, one detail he says should have changed everything. During the original investigation, unidentified hairs were recovered at the scene, found near where Ethan Chapin was located. Later forensic testing excluded Kohberger as the source of those hairs. In his petition, Kohberger claims that his legal team never fully explained the significance of this finding to him, and suggests that, had he understood it clearly at the time, his decision to accept the plea might have been entirely different. What the filing does not settle, and what remains genuinely unresolved, is what those hairs actually mean in the broader context of the case. Investigators have not treated the finding as evidence pointing toward another person's involvement, and prosecutors have given no public indication that their position on Kohberger's guilt has shifted in any way. It remains an open, disputed detail, one that an Idaho judge will now have to weigh carefully as part of this new filing. Legal analysts who have reviewed the petition describe the road ahead for Kohberger in blunt, unambiguous terms. Post-conviction relief is intentionally narrow by design. It exists as a safeguard, not a second chance. Courts do not grant this kind of relief simply because a defendant later regrets a decision, or because the full weight of a life sentence has settled in differently than they expected once they were living it, day after day, inside a cell. What the law requires is something far more specific: concrete evidence that actual misconduct occurred, not dissatisfaction discovered well after the fact. As one legal expert who reviewed the filing put it plainly, this cannot simply be a case of a man changing his mind. There has to be real evidence behind the claim, something a court can weigh and verify, not just a story told after the outcome no longer feels bearable. And that requirement is exactly where Kohberger runs directly into the record he built himself, one sworn answer at a time. Go back, once more, to that July morning in the courtroom. Every question Judge Hippler asked him, every answer Kohberger gave, on the record, under oath, in front of everyone in that room. Did he understand the charges against him? Yes. Was he thinking clearly? Yes. Had anyone pressured or forced him into the plea? No. Had anyone made him promises beyond what was written in the signed agreement? No. Was he satisfied with the legal representation he had received? Yes. Those were never meant to be casual questions, asked and forgotten. They were designed, deliberately and methodically, to be difficult to challenge later. A legal safeguard built specifically to prevent exactly this kind of filing from ever succeeding. At the time those words were spoken, almost no one in that courtroom imagined they would be tested again, more than a year later, by the very man who spoke them. Now, they form the foundation the state is expected to lean on heavily in its response. A former federal prison warden, asked to make sense of Kohberger's behavior since arriving in custody, offers a specific and pointed explanation for what he's observing, a pattern he says he has seen many times before among a certain kind of incarcerated individual. He describes it as testing the system, an individual who studies the process closely, not to accept the outcome that has already been decided, but to search, methodically, for procedural cracks, filing grievances, requesting access to the law library, building a paper trail, piece by piece, over time. Sometimes, according to this warden, the underlying goal isn't actually a new trial at all. Sometimes, it's leverage. a chance at a transfer to a different facility, a way to remain relevant in a story that would otherwise move on without him, or simply a way to hold on to some measure of control after surrendering nearly all of it under oath. Legal experts following this filing closely are largely aligned on where they expect it to lead. Given the strength of the original sworn plea, the explicit waiver of appeal rights, and the demanding legal standard required to succeed on a claim like this, most describe Kohberger's odds of overturning his conviction as slim at best. Not impossible, but narrow in a way few legal challenges ever fully recover from. For the families who believed this chapter of their lives was closed, the filing lands as its own kind of weight. Even those who anticipated something like this happening eventually, and some have said publicly that they were not entirely surprised, now find themselves facing the possibility, however small, of being pulled back into a legal process they believed they had finally left behind. But slim is not the same as impossible. And for the first time in more than a year, a case the public believed was closed for good is sitting in front of an Idaho judge once again, waiting to be decided. 2 threads, 1 case. And by the time you reach this point in the story, both of them have led to the exact same place, a courthouse in Ada County, Idaho, where a decision no one can predict yet is waiting to be made. On one side sits a financial trail made entirely of numbers, dates, and deposits, a commissary account that received over $10,000 in a single year, a mother who has continued showing up for her son through every stage of this process, in the only way the system allows her to. Nearly 20 additional people, strangers with no listed connection to him, choosing for their own reasons to send money to a man serving 4 consecutive life sentences, and at the end of it all, almost every dollar spent, almost nothing left behind. On the other side sits a handwritten petition, pages written not by an attorney, but by the man himself, arguing that a confession delivered under oath in front of 4 grieving families was never true to begin with. Is the money simply what it appears to be on the surface? A mother supporting her son through the darkest chapter either of them will ever live through. A public drawn in by a case that has held the country's attention for nearly 4 years, reaching out in whatever small way they feel they can. Ordinary explanations for what looks, at first glance, like an ordinary pattern of support. Or does it point towards something more deliberate? Inside a facility where every transaction is logged, every purchase tracked, and every dollar can carry weight far beyond what's printed on a receipt. Is there something happening behind that number that the records alone can't fully explain? And separately, does the petition represent a genuine legal challenge? An argument built on real evidence, strong enough to reopen a case the state has already fought hard to close? Or is it something else entirely? A calculated filing from a man legal experts already believe is facing odds he's unlikely to overcome, submitted not because the truth has changed, but because something else, attention, leverage, control, is what's actually being pursued. Neither question has an answer yet. Both are now sitting in the hands of an Idaho judge, moving through a legal process that unfolds carefully, deliberately, and rarely quickly. A process that could take months to resolve, with no guarantee of where it ultimately ends. What is certain, right now, in this moment, is this. A case the public believed was closed for good is no longer closed. A confession the state treated as final is being challenged from the inside by the very same person who gave it under oath. And a financial trail, sitting quietly inside court records, has raised questions that a single sworn word, guilty, was supposed to have already settled, once and for all. That is exactly where this case stands today, in a courthouse in Ada County, Idaho, with 4 families still waiting once again for whatever comes next, carrying a weight most of us will never fully understand, with a state prepared to defend a plea it fought hard to secure, and with one man behind prison walls still pursuing a legal fight that almost everyone watching this case believes he cannot win, but that he appears determined to pursue regardless. Whether that determination leads anywhere is something only time and one Idaho judge will ultimately decide. If this documentary helped you understand exactly where this case stands and how it got here, make sure you're subscribed for more in-depth case breakdowns like this one. We follow the paper trail, not the noise, and we'll be back the moment this story moves forward. See you in the next investigation.